Just hours after that video was recorded and published by ASMR YouTuber Marie Angel, she would be dead. Marie was an ASMR YouTuber who was on the rise. She was born in Ukraine but was living in Germany at the time of her death. And throughout her career on YouTube, she had cultivated a loving community of supporters on the app. But in September of 2024, something tragic would happen. On that day, Marie would upload a video answering viewers' questions. And one of the questions that one of her viewers asked was, "What do you think happens after you die?" And you can see her reading that question out loud at the beginning of this video. In the video, she reads the question out loud, but she doesn't really provide her viewers with a clear answer on her thoughts of life after death. Shortly after she recorded the video, she would upload it to her YouTube channel, and just a few hours later, she would be dead. As it turned out, later on that day, Marie was driving through Germany when a drunk driver collided with her vehicle. And unfortunately, she died at the scene, only hours after recording that now eerie video.
Rank these hot chips. They're all pretty good. Doritos, Dynamites, Takis, hot fries, the potato chips, the Utz, or the UTZs, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
The red chips?
Yes, the red hot chips. Hot Funyuns or hot Cheetos.
Okay. So first, right off the bat, straight off the bat, Takis.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, damn, my mouth is watering with this list. What the fuck? Number two, you add some limon to it. That shit goes crazy. A lot of people have used it for different shit like esquites and
Talking about hot Cheetos?
hot Cheetos. Because it's mad versatile, bro.
Okay.
And like I said, all the other ones are inspired by those two. Third, hot fries. It's like a OG, especially if you're from New York. Low-key, they were cheap before. And I don't feel like they ever disappoint, even though sometimes you gotta be in the mood to have them.
Bro, hot fries are a fire and a staple in my opinion, bro.
Next, the Funyuns, because Funyuns themselves are valid, but now they're adding the little spice to them, so it's like that. Last, I don't even have to say the next one after Funyuns. Last is the Dorito Dynamites. I don't give a fuck, bro. That's literally a ripoff of fucking Takis. I had them. They're decent. Like, they're not like fucking like trash or whatever, but I just can't get over the fact that it's literally like a fucking copy. Shout out to the Mallory Bros. Damn.
Yeah, they're mad entertaining, bro. I fucking love them.
There was a man named Igor Yefimov who was a Russian airport worker, and one day something awful happened. As Igor was preparing flight Air Astana 737 for takeoff by either loading luggage onto the plane or guiding its direction, he accidentally was standing too close to the plane's engine when it suddenly sucked him up and killed him instantly. His entrails and bits of his body were then shot all over the runway. The flight was then cancelled and all the passengers were onboarded and were put in local hotels for the night. Investigators were shocked by this gruesome accident and couldn't figure out how this happened. They believe Igor didn't follow the safety protocol and was standing too close to the engine when it sucked him up and killed him instantly. There's a CCTV video of the situation that went around on social media showing the whole situation unfolding. This is a terrible accident and sounds made up, but believe it or not, situations like this had happened before. Rest in peace to Igor, and what a terrible, terrible death.
This teenager went missing. Police would uncover some disturbing information about somebody extremely close to her. It was May 2006 in Omaha in Nebraska. Jessica Jo O'Grady was just 19 years old and had her whole life ahead of her. She was living with her two friends in an apartment, and Jessica was a really liked girl by all accounts. She was bubbly and had no problem making friends. She was confident and intelligent. She actually was attending university and wanted to become a teacher. She had a boyfriend who was the same age as her. This was Chris Edwards, and they seemed like a really normal couple who would hang out not only just on their own but also with Jessica's other friends. On the 10th of the month, Jessica was at her apartment with her friends when she got a text off Chris. It didn't seem to her friends that anything was wrong. This was quite normal for Jessica to speak to Chris and then sometimes pop over to his, so she told her friends that she was going over there for the evening. At this point, it was just after 11 p.m. Horrifically, they would never see her alive again. About half an hour later, her friends got a text off Jessica that was a little bit cryptic. It said, "No more shenanigans for Jessica," and this was kind of like a code word that Jessica and her friends used for getting intimate. It wasn't totally clear what the text meant, but the girls figured that they'd see her in the morning and they'd all catch up. However, the next day, there was no sign of Jessica at all. She just never came home. The friends tried to contact her but had no luck, and they also contacted Jessica's family, but they'd not heard of her either. They then questioned Chris and said, what time did she leave yours? And Chris dropped the bombshell that she'd never been there in the first place. This was obviously very disturbing, as the girls were like, well, where did she go then? Worryingly, some other girls had vanished in the area recently too. A girl called Amber Harris had gone missing from a bus stop, and 35-year-old Tracy Tribble had also been reported missing. Locals started to worry that maybe she was the victim of a serial killer. So was this a coincidence? Well, it turns out that it just was a coincidence, and if you want me to cover the other cases, please let me know in the comments. Days later, a local person contacted police to say that they'd found an abandoned car, and this was Jessica's car. Police then obviously decided to question the boyfriend. This was the obvious kind of suspect to look at. He said that he'd been golfing earlier on in the day, which his friends confirmed. He then said that they'd been to watch a film, and again, the friends confirmed that he had. Something strange did come up in the interview though. Chris kind of just randomly offered the information that he thought Jessica was depressed because she was pregnant. Chris also offered the information that he didn't think that the baby was his. Now, this obviously completely changed the course of the investigation. We know that one of the leading causes of death of pregnant women is homicide. Again, police spoke with Chris's friends, but although they said that he'd been with them for the golf and the film, they didn't know what he did after going for the film. Investigators then did some digging into Chris's personal life and found out Jessica wasn't the only woman in his life. He was also seeing a girl called Michelle, and then there was another bombshell. Just 4 months before Jessica's disappearance, Michelle found out she was pregnant with Chris's child. Chris had got Michelle pregnant and they'd agreed to get married. So basically, this Chris had got 2 women pregnant in a very short period of time. This was not looking good. He definitely had a motive for killing her. Officers searched Chris's house and found blood, and not just a little bit, not just like a cut from a finger. This was a lot of blood. There was an absolutely huge blood stain, and you can see it on Google if you look on the mattress that had conveniently been flipped over in Chris's bedroom. There was also blood in Chris's car and on a weapon that he had in his house. CCTV also showed that the day after Jessica vanished, Chris went shopping for white paint. Forensics managed to match the blood to missing Jessica, but they still hadn't found her body. Despite this, Chris was taken to trial where he was found guilty of Jessica's murder. He was given life in prison and Jessica's body remains to be found.
This 10-year-old girl saved 2 lives but lost her own. Kira Larson was just 10 years old, living in a quiet California neighborhood. She was spirited, protective, and full of love for her family and friends. And that love would soon be tested in the most unimaginable way. On February 22nd, 2016, Kira was watching 2 younger children ages 1 and 2 playing nearby. Everything seemed peaceful, until it wasn't. A parked SUV began speeding towards the unsuspecting toddlers. Time seemed to freeze as the vehicle gained speed and headed straight for the children. In that moment, Kira didn't hesitate. Without a second thought for her own safety, she sprinted towards the children, pushing them out of harm's way. But Kira wasn't fast enough to save herself. The SUV struck her with brutal force, pinning her underneath. The laughter of the kids playing was replaced by panicked screams as neighbors rushed to the scene. Kira was then taken to the hospital, but the injuries were way too severe. The brave little girl who had just saved 2 lives didn't survive. Her community was left shattered, but filled with awe at her heroism. Kira was recognized as a true hero, her sacrifice an act of love and courage few could fathom.
Catálogo de Televisa, or the Televisa catalog.
Oh, fuck, bro. I'm nervous, bro. Fuck.
So at first, this just started as just like a Twitter conspiracy, saying how Televisa had this catalog that they would show different actresses, different singers who were involved with Televisa.
Okay.
Mainly it was women. They would have different pictures of them.
Okay.
And it all started with a singer. Her name was Lucerita.
Okay.
That was the first picture that came out. And it just said that, oh, I think she was a virgin at the time. Basically what the Televisa catalog was
Was it like a catalog where people could find these people and have sexual acts with them?
yeah, you choose what girl you want and you would pay.
This is basically sex trafficking.
Yes, bro. Certain people started voicing shit on the news. There was this lady, her name was Alejandra Avalos. She's an actress, a singer, and she was also involved with Televisa. But in 2017, she ended up getting kicked out because she spoke up about it, saying how she was invited before. And I'm gonna show you the thing live where she was interviewed and shit.
Me habló una señora de las famosas representantes de artistas y me dijo que había un catálogo de Televisa. que si yo quería participar. Muy amablemente le dije que yo no me manejaba bajo esos estándares sexuales o de favores sexuales. Uno accediera. Ella me decía que había hasta $1,000,000 por noche.
She basically confirmed that there's some weird shit going on between like the women that work for Televisa.
What the fuck?
Yeah, bro.
Okay. I don't think I got all of this. How come you got a light flashing on the that? I don't know.
On December 22nd, 1990, Beth Potts, her daughter KT, and her husband Rolf returned back to their family cabin. They had been out running some last-minute Christmas errands, but when they entered the home, they found something shocking. Inside of the house was Vaughn Lester Taylor and Edward Stephen Deli. The family had returned to their cabin pictured above and walked in the middle of those two men robbing their house. And that's what the footage from the beginning of this video was. That was real handycam footage captured by the robbers and future murderers, opening up the family's presents moments before the family returned home. Sadly, the robbers would then shoot and kill both Beth and her daughter Kay, and they also forced Rolf, the husband, to undress. They shot him in the head and doused him in gasoline. And afterwards, they kidnapped the family's two daughters, Trisha and Lene, who were 16 and 20 years old at the time. The two robbers then tried to escape the scene on stolen snowmobiles with the kidnapped girls, but shockingly, Rolf, the father, even though he had been doused in gasoline and shot in the head, was still alive. And he chased the two men down the road before they ultimately crashed into the snow and were then captured by authorities. To this day, Vaughn Lester Taylor claims that he was innocent. He says that he aided in the robbery, but he didn't actually do any of the killing. And he's petitioned for parole many times and just might get out one day, which is a horrifying thought.
Innocent sleepover would turn into a murder investigation. This terrifying case proves that you really have no idea what's round the corner. It was a cold winter's night in December 1998 in Hopewell, Missouri. So 15-year-old Josh Sansauci, he was going for a typical sleepover at his friend Michael Politti's house. Michael lived at his house with his mum Rita. The pair had plans to play some chess together and play some video games. However, being typical teenage boys, they got bored quickly and wanted something more entertaining to do. They knew that nearby there were some railway tracks. They actually frequently went there to set fires. Now, it sounds dangerous, but this is the kind of thing I feel that normal teenage boys kind of do. They did this for a little bit and then they headed back to Michael's house. Now that night, Michael's mum, 40-year-old Rita, had been working at a nearby bar. She came home from work just after the boys got back and everyone just kind of went to bed. Just before 6:30 a.m, however, the boys woke up startled. The bedroom that they were in was covered in thick smoke. Now Michael had been sleeping on his bed and Josh had just spent the night on the floor. So having woke to a room filled with smoke, the boys obviously panicked and they started crawling to the front door of the house. Now Michael realised his mum's obviously in the house too, so he shouted for his mum, but he got no reply. The boys then made their way into Rita's room to try and get her to get out of the house, but they saw something horrific. She was covered in blood and she was on fire from the waist up. The boys said that they completely panicked. Rita had been bludgeoned to death. The children obviously fled the house and police showed up and brought them in for questioning. The two boys maintained that they'd been asleep the entire time until the smoke woke them up. However, officers decided to quickly arrest 14-year-old Michael for his mum's murder. They said that they mainly did this based on two factors. One, how little emotion he showed, and obviously we all know that could have been shock. And two, because he failed a voice stress test, which I'd never heard of, but I presume it's something very similar to like a lie detector test. Now those are obviously very controversial, and I've actually seen cases where a murderer has passed a lie detector and an innocent party has failed one. What police seemed to fail to look into was potential other suspects and the horrific DV history between Michael's mum Rita and his dad Ed, who wasn't living with them. Ed had cheated on Rita numerous times and they were apparently both quite violent with each other. On one occasion, police had to be called when the dad pushed Rita to the ground and was choking her on the floor. Rita had ended up divorcing Ed, which he was livid about. Ed had even tried to bribe his son Michael with money to come and live with him instead of his mum. Michael actually really liked living with his mum. He declined the offer, he declined the money, and he said he just wanted to live with him and his mum. Interestingly, at the time of the murder, Rita and Ed's divorce had been finalised for less than a week. Despite all of this obviously illustrating a potential other suspect, Michael was charged with the murder and taken to trial. A jury found him guilty and he was given life in prison. The Innocence Project agreed to take on his case, and they agreed that the evidence he was convicted on wasn't really evidence at all. At his trial, it was claimed that a solvent was found in Michael's shoes, which was like petrol. However, it was later found that yes, solvents were used, but they were used in the manufacturing of the shoe itself. And this was similar to petrol, but it didn't prove that there was petrol on Michael's shoes. In 2021, Michael got a lifeline. A bill was passed in Missouri that basically gave young offenders a second chance. Michael was granted parole and he was finally out of prison, but he was desperate for his conviction to be wiped from his record. He obviously felt that he was still labelled as his mum's murderer, which he said he wasn't. He's still fighting to prove his innocence, and Michael's siblings state that their dad has a funny way of showing that he loves them. In an interview, they reported that his interest in their lives had been on and off, and they go through stages of not speaking.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
A man reported his girlfriend missing and then he was found dead. On the 21st of May this year, police got a concerning phone call. The call came from Matthew Poole. He was reporting his girlfriend, 38-year-old Ashley Corrigian, missing. He told officers he hadn't seen her for a week and was starting to get worried. She was last officially seen alive on the 14th of May. Now, this was strange for her to just disappear because she was actually the mother to an 11-year-old girl called Delilah. Police began looking into the whereabouts of the missing woman and 2 days later showed up at a property in Hawaii. When officers arrived at Matthew's home, they heard a loud bang. They then discovered his body. He appeared to have unalived himself as they entered. Now, evidence from that property then led them to a vacant, undeveloped property. It was there that they made a heartbreaking discovery. They found a body, quote, in advanced stages of decomposition, end quote, at 7 p.m. that night. The body was later determined as Ashley. She had passed away from a gunshot wound to the head. Police are considering the double killing a murder and then self-unaliving.
I also remember seeing another video from 2017 in Jalisco of a Jesus Christ statue moving in the middle of La Misa. It's quick, it's in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I don't know how people want to take that kind of like a miracle in a way.
Yeah.
Or other people, you know, say it's like supernatural, creepy thing. It is paranormal, though.
Of course, yeah.
At the end of the day, bro, because if you see a statue or anything that's not human move, it gives you a little bit like of a...
Catches you off guard.
But what it reminded me of was a movie.
Oh, okay.
It's a very, very old movie. It's a vintage movie that I watched as a kid. It's called Marcelino Pan y Vino.
I've never seen that.
So what the movie is basically about is this little boy, he's an orphan. His name is Marcelino, right? He gets taken into this monastery with all the Catholic and religious monks. And obviously he's a kid, bro. So very mischievous. And one day he sneaks into the attic of the monastery.
Okay.
And he sees a giant crucifix of Jesus. And he starts talking to the statue. And eventually, over time of the movie, the statue starts talking back to him.
What the fuck?
Having regular conversation with him, saying like you shouldn't be bad and stuff. At the end of the movie,
Okay, so did Mr. Beast go to an Illuminati meeting? So, Mr. Beast was recently on a podcast when he said this.
I don't know how much I can say, but there's just like this super exclusive event with just all these really rich and famous people. And I just did not belong there at the time. And he was just one of them. And
How'd you get invited to that event? Island in the Bahamas?
well, I think it was. It was like I remember pulling. I just can't say too much, but I just remember pulling up, and there's like dozens of guys with just like assault and stuff, and I was like, oh, it's like that high level of an event. And and he just was like, so I ended up talking up there. So it's like I don't even know how to put into words. Like everyone there was either like ultra famous or just like a billionaire. They're like it was crazy having all those people in that room. And then at dinner, they just pair you up with random people, so you meet new people, and it was the one at the table, and we just.
So yeah, after hearing Mr. Beast talk about it and say it, do you think he went to an Illuminati party? Or do you think it was just some high-end party with no relation to the Illuminati? I honestly have no clue, but let me know what you think about this whole thing.
Imagine finding your friend's decapitated body. When this woman did just that, what she screamed was heartbreaking. It was the 2nd of November 2023 in Santa Rosa, California. Luis Gustavo Arroyo Lopez had just been released from prison. He'd spent time behind bars for assault and weapons charges. On the day in question, his nan Elvia, aged 64, was at her home. Her neighbour, Jessica, recalled seeing Elvia greet her grandson at the door and be pleasantly surprised. However, Elvia would soon end up dead. Just hours after the neighbour Jessica witnessed the first initial interaction, she then saw a friend of Elvia's enter the property and run out panicked. She was shouting, "No head." Police raced to the scene where they found the grandmother decapitated in the house. After finding out that Luis had been at the property at around the time of the killing, officers tracked him down and arrested him. It's believed that he murdered his nan in the house and left the scene with her head. The 24-year-old has actually pleaded guilty to killing his nan and will be back in court to be sentenced soon. A motive for the killing at the moment is unknown. Elvia's family stated she was a loving person and she adored so dearly all her grandchildren. She didn't deserve what was done to her.
Those who don't know, there's a lake in Cameroon, like the north part of it. So those villagers living around that lake, there was a night where the villagers were all sleeping, of course. There was a loud noise coming from the lake, a loud explosion noise, and the water started to bubble up exactly like when you boil water. And when the bubble started to pop, it started creating a mist, which covered the whole area around the lake and stuff. The villager who was living on top of a hill saw the mist around the area, but he just didn't think anything of it and went back to sleep. He wakes up the next morning and
everybody's dead.
All the animals are dead. All the cattle, livestock, even like little insects are dead. And what happened was there was an eruption underwater, which created a bunch of toxic gases to rise up like CO2, and it started to cover up the area, which ended up killing 1,700 to 2,000 people and around 3,500 animals.
It kind of reminded me of the Hunger Games and Catching Fire, the second one.
I've never watched any Hunger Games, bro.
There's basically this one scene where the people who are running the games like release a poisonous fog or whatever, and like whenever you touch it, you either like die or get burned by it.
This man was caught on camera murdering his wife and he only got 10 years in prison. Carrie Birmingham, who was 60 years old, shot his wife Patricia Birmingham, who was 48 years old. He shot her 3 times outside their home in Spring, Texas, and the couple had been arguing for about 30 minutes after Carrie allegedly discovered the affair his wife was having. This incident was captured on video by his wife Patricia, and in the disturbing video, Carrie can be seen walking in the driveway with a bathrobe on and a shotgun in his hand. Carrie can also be heard telling his wife, quote, "Okay, bye. You're going to meet Jesus. I hope it was worth it," end quote, before shooting her 3 times and killing her. Whatever you do, don't look up the video. It honestly is pretty disturbing, and I wouldn't recommend watching it. After doing this, Carrie was arrested and charged with murder, being held on a $200,000 bond, and recently in 2024, Carrie Birmingham pleaded guilty to the murder, but claimed he shot his wife in the heat of the moment. And despite the jury being all females, the woman sentenced Carrie to 10 years in prison, with parole eligibility in 5 years. Now I'm going to play a short clip from the video showing Carrie talking to Patricia before he shot her dead.
Video? I'll pull it. I'm mad enough to pull it. Okay. All right, goodbye, Reese. Nice to know you. You go meet Jesus.
This woman murdered her husband in the most unusual way, and their son witnessed the whole thing. It was September 2016. Ramandeep Kaur Man from Derby was married to Sukhjit Singh. The pair had met in 2002 when Ramandeep was 17 and he was 20. They married each other a few years later and went on to have 2 sons. From the outside, the pair looked happy. However, things would soon come to a chilling end for the pair, witnessed entirely by their son. Now, Sukhjit's childhood best friend Gurpreet Singh was secretly having an affair with his wife. They'd been seeing each other for about a year behind his back when they hatched a murderous plan. It's believed that the motive behind this was to claim on his life insurance policy. On the 2nd of September, Ramandeep was cooking for her husband. His favourite dish was a biryani, and she knew this. She took some substances and laced his curry with them. She served it up to him, and after eating the curry, he became quite disoriented, quite sleepy, and quite confused. He headed up to bed and his wife followed, along with his friend Gurpreet. Shortly after, Ramandeep held a pillow over his head. As he gasped for breath, it woke up the pair's eldest son, Arjun. The 9-year-old watched in horror as Gurpreet hit his dad over the head with a hammer. Ramandeep then cut his throat. Now, the child was obviously traumatized by witnessing all this, but bravely eventually gave evidence in court. The murderous pair never did get to claim the £2 million life insurance policy. Gurpreet was given life in prison and fined £3,000. Ramandeep has been sentenced to death but has appealed.
So recently I visited the other Epstein Island here in America, North Fox Island in Michigan. It is an island where there was a child pornography ring being run. It was a pedophile island where hundreds of children were victimized over the years, and the guy who was running this operation, Francis Sheldon, he disappeared from America. He flew off of the island on his private plane. He got tipped off by somebody, probably in law enforcement or the FBI, and he escaped all justice in this case. But it took us a lot of effort to get to this island. We explored all the remaining structures that were utilized back in those horrible, horrific deeds. And in this video that I'm posting this evening, we expose the truth about this situation and tell the horrifying details. And it's stuff that haunts you. It's really, you guys have seen here on TikTok that I cover a lot of stories about pedophiles and sex trafficking, and I try my hardest to raise awareness about these issues. But being there in person and having talked to family members of victims in this case and everything that comes along with that, it's horrific. This stuff is really dark, but this is a very important video to me. So if this topic interests you, if you want to help me spread awareness about this, definitely go check out my new documentary. The link is going to be in my bio. It's called Pedophile Island on YT. I don't want to say the actual word in case I get blacklisted here. But yeah, this is the start of something huge on my YouTube channel. We have a lot of big announcements coming. We're almost at 1 million subscribers, so thank you all. And yeah, the North Fox ring I could talk about for weeks, and we start going into just immense detail, stuff that happened there, snuff films, different suspects, new things that people have told me about the active investigation that aren't public yet that we talk about in the video. So yeah, get ready. I will see you guys soon. It's going to be on my YT tonight.
Are you choosing bear or man? If you said man, this case might make you change your mind. Amy Moore was a beautiful and intelligent second-grade teacher from Illinois. She worked at the Grove Elementary School. She was a hard-working and loving mother to 3 boys, aged 11, 12, and 7. Amy and her ex Matthew had recently got divorced. Now, Amy was struggling to care for their sons all alone, and she was kind of living paycheck to paycheck. As I said, she was very hardworking, and she just was trying to make ends meet so that she could look after her family. Now, tellingly, Amy had to take out orders of protection against Matthew. Tragically, Amy would be failed by the system. On the 29th of May in Normal, Illinois, the unthinkable happened. Matthew forced entry into Amy's home in the early hours of the morning. He confronted her and then shot her multiple times, killing her, before turning the weapon on himself. Amy's brother, Thomas Burns, stated that there had been numerous concerning incidents over the years, and Amy had really tried to protect herself and her family by getting law enforcement involved. Tragically, her 3 sons are now left without a mother. Thomas has since started a GoFundMe, which I'll put in my bio, to help to support the children.
These are people who abused animals reacting to their sentences. This is Elizabeth James, and what she did to a dog is absolutely disturbing. Elizabeth James moved in with her boyfriend and his mother at a place in Tampa back in August 2022, and the mother had an 8-year-old husky named Maya who was perfectly healthy. But suddenly, Maya began showing signs of abuse. The family veterinarian treated the dog, who had punctures to her head and other injuries. Later, the family installed a hidden camera and caught Elizabeth James in the disturbing act. She was beating Maya with a rubber mallet. Elizabeth hit Maya with the mallet extremely hard 38 times and even kicked and slammed Maya. Luckily, Maya survived and she continues to go to the vet for ongoing treatment. You can find the video online of Elizabeth hitting and beating Maya, but I don't recommend watching it because it's obviously disturbing. Now, what I'm about to show you is Elizabeth James reacting to her sentence of 6 years in prison.
It was so violent and disturbing, we can hardly show any of it. It shows Elizabeth James using a rubber mallet to beat then-boyfriend's family dog, a husky named Maya.
What she did to Maya for 151 days, my dog lived in fear. It's a living thing, and she just abused her and abused her over and over.
The family began suspecting abuse after Elizabeth moved in with them in August 2022.
Not counting the ongoing abuse, August of 2020, the defendant struck Maya 38 times with the mallet and 26 additional strikes.
That's at least 64 hits. Prosecutors point out that's just what was caught on camera.
I think it's a miracle that Maya's alive.
I've never done anything like that. I've never put my hands on anybody. But that doesn't excuse it.
I would impose a sentence at the guidelines, 70.8 months in Florida State Prison.
That's more than 5 years behind bars. Lopez says it's a fitting sentence.
These are some bone-chilling facts about serial killers that will horrify you. Towards the end of Jeffrey Dahmer's killing spree, he said that his apartment was filled with so many of his victims' bodies that he started to run out of room and actually kept one of his victims' bodies in his bathtub and then showered over top of his body every day for over a month. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, actually installed security alarms for a living at one point and actually installed multiple security alarms at homes of people that were only getting security alarms out of fear for the BTK killer. Serial killer Pedro Alonso Lopez only received 16 years in prison after pleading guilty to killing over 100 girls that were aged 9 to 12 years old. He was released despite promising to continue killing, and after his release, he went missing and was never seen again. That one is particularly terrifying for me. Serial killer Richard Chase only went into homes to kill people if their door was unlocked. He said that if a door was locked, he felt as if that meant he was unwelcomed. Serial killer Mac Ray Edwards had a job where he built highways in California, and he would bury his victims' bodies under where he was building these highways. To this day, most of his victims have never been found and are likely still under the highways in California. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam killer, has been eligible for parole, which means he's eligible to be released since 2002, but has asked them not to release him from prison for over 22 years. That one I'm grateful for. You can keep doing that. I'm okay with that. I know this video was a little bit different than like the typical like deep dives we do, but I found it really, really interesting. Let me know if you found it interesting, if you'd want to see more like it, like a part 2. Also, let me know if you'd want to see a deep dive on any of the serial killers we mentioned, because I'm definitely interested in discussing maybe David Berkowitz or Dennis Rader or any of them. Let me know what you think. Until then, I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.
This streamer killed his girlfriend while live streaming, and it's one of the most disturbing things ever streamed. Stanislav Reshnikov, who was on the left as a vlogger/streamer, was famously known as Stas Reflay, and he inflicted inhumane physical abuse on his pregnant girlfriend, Valentina Grigorieva, who was on the right when a viewer asked him to do so for merely $1,000 in his YouTube live video. Valentina's beating was followed by Stas stripping her naked and forcefully locking her outside of the house in sub-zero temperatures of December. Valentina kept on knocking on the door, telling him that she was going to die. After 15 minutes, Stas checked on Valentina as she stopped knocking on the door. He then found Valentina's unconscious, not breathing, and pale body. Stas made a failed attempt at resurrecting his girlfriend by giving her CPR. Eventually, he grew very scared of what he had done and called the paramedic team. In the footage, he can be seen carrying her back into his apartment trying to revive her. He is heard saying, "Velia, are you alive? My bunny, what's up with you? Velia, Velia, damn, you look like you are dead. Bunny, come on, tell me something. I'm worrying. Damn, I'm not feeling a heartbeat, guys. No pulse. She's pale. She is not breathing. Wake up, Velia. I love you. Wake up." The paramedic team then arrived and announced Valentina dead upon examination. Initially, she was assumed to die from hypothermia. However, the forensic team revealed that Valentina had died from a head injury inflicted upon her during domestic violence. The police arrested Stas soon after he killed his pregnant girlfriend for money, and he was given a sentence of 6 years by the court in 2021. But what do you think about this? This man literally put his pregnant girlfriend outside in freezing cold temperatures for $1,000 because one of his viewers donated it and told him to. This is absolutely gut-turning, and the live stream, if you ever decide to watch it, is extremely unnerving, especially when her lifeless body gets brought into the live stream. Just hearing him talk to her and knowing that she's dead is extremely unsettling.
The last thing that I have is sent by one of you guys.
This is a story time. To this day, I still haven't figured out what it was. This situation happened my sophomore year of high school. We lived in this house off of like I-85 in Georgia. A single house on that highway, and there was like a really dilapidated, beat up house like next door to us. Our house had a long driveway. We had these sensors, so if anybody crossed by or any animals or any cars came into our driveway, we would know. It would beep around the whole house. One day my mom leaves. It was me and my brother alone.
A good sign.
It was my bed and the open window against it. By the headboard, it was just a window, and that window peered into the woods. I'm up about like 2-3 a.m. Brother's asleep, whole house is dark, and I decide, okay, let me just go play some Sims. I lay down on my bed. Let me remind you, windows behind me. I open up my laptop screen to go play some Sims.
Oh my gosh!
And in that window, on my life, I could just see the blackness, and I saw a face, like a face clear as fucking day. I'm a skeptical person, but I could see a face. I jumped up. My flight or fight was I've never felt that in my life, and I felt it that moment, and I ran to my brother's room.
Do not watch this video if you're claustrophobic. This is the dramatic moment that a man was rescued after 3 days at the bottom of the ocean. It was the 26th of May 2013. Harrison O'Keen was sat on the toilet of a boat. He was 29 years old and working as a cook on the boat in question. The boat was just off the coast of Nigeria, and Harrison was soon to be having some annual leave. That was when disaster struck. A wave crashed into the boat, flipping it instantly upside down. The whole boat went black. Harrison was hit on the head by the toilet and felt blood pouring off his head. Shortly after, he worryingly felt the boat hit the bottom of the sea. The small room he was in started filling up with water. Harrison's heart understandably began to race. He was being buried alive in a watery grave. Now, as the water levels started rising, Harrison could hear his colleagues crying out. Harrison remained in a small pocket of air that had formed in the room he was in. He ended up breaking off a small piece of metal from a vent and using that to break free from this small room. He was able to actually find a torch that worked, but it was still incredibly dark and confusing. He managed to find some food supplies to keep him going. Harrison stated he could hear his colleagues crying out, but gradually the cries got less and less frequent and quieter. That was until he was left in silence. He was hoping that his colleagues had managed to escape. He stayed still in the area that he was in, praying and thinking about his mum and his wife. He knew it would be really dangerous if he started to panic. Then finally, after days, out of the darkness came a small light. It was a diver. After 62 hours of being submerged, he was finally rescued. Now, he was seriously dehydrated at this point, but he had to be taken to a decompression chamber. This is an example of what one looks like, and because he'd been submerged for so long, he had so much nitrogen in his body, and it would be life-threatening for him to come out straight away. He had to spend 60 hours then in this claustrophobic chamber. Then, finally, Harrison was able to be reunited with his loved ones. Tragically, though, his colleagues had all drowned. Now, strangely, far from being terrified of the ocean, Harrison's actually now a professional diver. He really is an amazing example of human resilience.
This 12-year-old girl unalived her entire family so she could be with her 23-year-old boyfriend. Jasmine Richardson was a normal kid until she turned 11 years old. She started dressing in a darker aesthetic, liking some darker things. She would post on websites like MySpace and vampirefreaks.com, telling people she was 15 instead of 11. Because the thing about Jasmine is even though she was 11, she didn't look 11. She always kind of looked older than she actually was. She started sneaking out to hang out with her new older friends and would meet older guys. By the time that Jasmine was 12 years old, she was in a full-on relationship with this freak, 23-year-old Jeremy. And just so you know, just because she was lying about her age on social media, this guy was fully aware that his girlfriend was 12 years old, a literal preteen, and he would also tell people that he was a 300-year-old werewolf. So for context, we are dealing with a full-on freak. Jasmine's parents were horrified when they found out that their 12-year-old daughter was online telling people that she was older than she actually was and that she was dating a full-on adult. So they did their best to keep Jeremy away. Jasmine and Jeremy didn't want to be apart, and they thought that the only way that they could be together is if Jasmine's parents were no longer alive. What started out as jokes became real plans to not only unalive Jasmine's parents, but her 8-year-old brother as well. On April 22nd, 2006, Jasmine secretly let Jeremy into her home where he brutally unalived her parents. Jasmine's 8-year-old brother, Jacob, heard the entire thing while hiding in his room holding his lightsaber for protection. It's like heart-shattering. It's unclear who actually unalived 8-year-old Jacob because Jasmine and Jeremy blame each other for his death. Jasmine and Jeremy thought that they were soulmates, and now with her parents out of the picture, they were going to be together forever. But in reality, that was not the case. They were actually quickly brought to justice because they were bragging to anyone that would listen about what they had just done to her entire family. And of course, as soon as they were arrested, the soulmates turned on each other. Jeremy was sentenced to 3 life sentences, but due to Jasmine's age, she only served 6 years in a rehabilitation center and 4 years on probation. She was fully released into society in 2017 and has been out living in society free as a bird ever since under a new name. Actually, a lot of controversy in this case because of that, but what do you think? Do you think Jasmine is a victim, a child manipulated by a predator, or do you think if she's old enough to do the crime, she's old enough to do the time?
When a teenager disappeared with her fugitive boyfriend, people feared she was dead. Absolutely nobody expected what had actually happened. It was April 2023 and Caitlin Coons was living in a foster home in Ohio. She had a history of running away and again disappeared on the month in question. A huge search began for not only Caitlin but her 33-year-old boyfriend. This was Jonathan Jones. Now, Jonathan lived at home with his mum Nicole, who reportedly disapproved of their relationship. Caitlin was obviously way younger than Jonathan, so understandably Nicole was uncomfortable with this. The search for the pair was an anxious one. Jonathan was actually wanted on child endangerment charges and indecent images. Police also considered Caitlin to be an endangered child. Posts with the pair's faces on flooded social media as members of the public desperately tried to help. Many worried that Caitlin was in harm's way. The following month, though, some apparent good news. The couple had been tracked down, both alive, at the Mexican border. However, things were far from over and the case would start to get darker than anyone could have imagined. While the couple were missing, social services had phoned police. They'd received a shocking text from Caitlin's phone. She told the staff she'd killed 2 people and was on the run. It transpired that on the 18th of April, Caitlin had run away from the foster home. She'd made her way to Jonathan's mum's home with Jonathan. Now, Caitlin had resentment towards Jonathan's mum, Nicole. She felt that she was interfering with them being together. Caitlin gave Jonathan an ultimatum: kill his mum or she would kill her. She told him he had 5 hours to take action. He actually didn't, so eventually Caitlin took matters into her own hands. Caitlin bludgeoned Nicole to death with a rock and strangled her. The couple then went to the shop and bought bin bags and cleaning supplies. They horrifically both drove and got some food and ate the food together while Nicole's remains were in the boot of the car. They then drove the remains to some large bins by some apartments. Now, tragically, Nicole's remains have never been recovered and are presumably in landfill somewhere. Caitlin and Jonathan both pleaded no contest to aggravated murder and abuse of a corpse. They were both sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Caitlin argued that she did not send the text that admitted to 2 murders.
If your wife is missing, why would you Google how to dispose of a woman's body? 39-year-old Anna Walsh was last seen leaving her Cohasset, Massachusetts home around 4 a.m. on New Year's Day. There hasn't been any cell phone or bank activity since that day, and she hasn't been seen or heard from again. Anna shares the home with her husband Brian and their 3 kids. Just one day after she disappeared, Brian was caught on security footage at Home Depot buying $450 worth of cleaning supplies, maps, and a tarp. Anna wasn't reported missing until January 4th from both her husband and her employer after she failed to show up to work. When investigators searched the home, they found a broken knife and blood in the Walsh's basement. During the investigation, authorities were sent to a waste facility in Peabody, which is about an hour away from the family home. During their search, they found a hacksaw, a hatchet, and a bloody rug. Also found was a garbage bag containing blood as well as human tissue, all believed to be connected to Anna's disappearance. After looking into Brian, police discovered that after Anna went missing, he Googled, quote, how to dispose of a 115-pound woman's body, end quote. Just a few days ago, Brian was arrested and charged with misleading the police investigation into the disappearance of his wife, and he has since pleaded not guilty. He's currently being held on a $500,000 bail. This is not the first time that Brian has had run-ins with the law. In 2021, Brian pleaded guilty to charges related to an attempt to scam someone in LA using fake Andy Warhol paintings. Because of that, Brian was placed on home confinement, which was still taking place up until his recent arrest. Adding to that, he was also at the center of an ongoing dispute over his late father's will. His family members accused him of destroying the document and wrongly taking over his father's estate. According to Anna's mom, Anna had texted her on Christmas and said, quote, please mama, come tomorrow, end quote. Anna's mom said that she and Brian loved each other, but this seemed to allude to some problems, although Anna didn't mention exactly why she wanted her mom to come so urgently. According to her, Anna also recently mentioned her frustration with Brian's home confinement. This forced her to temporarily live alone in a Washington, D.C. home that Anna also owned. Anna worked a lot in Washington, D.C. and would often visit the home. Anna reportedly tried calling her mom around midnight on the night she went missing, as well as once more an hour later, but her mom was sleeping and missed the call. Right after, she also tried calling her sister and a friend, but they also missed the call. A friend of the Walshes has come forward and stated that he spent New Year's Eve with a couple and has said that there was no indication of any tragedy or trouble. But it's now been 10 days since Anna was last seen. This is an ongoing investigation, so hopefully more answers will come to light soon.
This woman was left with no choice but to kill her husband to save her son. Tina Tolbert was living in Michigan. She'd met her partner, Mee Wash, when she was 25. Now, she was fairly inexperienced in relationships, and Mee Wash really love-bombed her. They soon moved in together despite her family having serious concerns. They knew the red flags and could see that he was controlling her, but Tina was already under his spell. Now, he started isolating her from her family and friends. He would brainwash her into thinking that her loved ones didn't care about her. One evening, after an argument, he flew into a rage and beat her up. Although she did call police, she was too embarrassed and ashamed to press any charges. Now, Mee Wash knew that Tina wanted to leave him, and he threatened her that if she did, he would kill her and her family. He ended up leaving his job and telling Tina that she had to support him financially. He began to regularly her, and when she resisted, he would get even more violent. Eventually, one of these attacks resulted in a pregnancy. Tina gave birth to baby Philip in 2011, and he was diagnosed as autistic. He was non-verbal, and Tina just knew that he was her reason for continuing with life. She had a strong desire to love him and keep him safe. Meanwhile, Mee Wash was pressuring Tina to marry him. She admitted that their wedding day was the most unhappy day of her life. She was continuously having to hide her black eyes from people. The marriage ended up only making the violence worse. Now, this went on for years, and when Philip turned 7, Tina was due to go and see some friends. When she returned, Mee Wash attacked her. He swung a chair at her so hard that it snapped her arm. The bone was sticking out of the flesh. Now, he refused to take her to hospital until she drank some alcohol and agreed to pretend that she did it when she was drunk. She was too scared to decline, and so she went to the hospital, they believed the story, and then they sent her home with him. When they returned home, the attacks continued. He would choke her and slam her head into furniture. Now, one of these attacks was so brutal that it actually left a dent in the fridge where he slammed her head into it. Then things eventually came to a dramatic conclusion. Mee Wash bundled Philip and Tina into the car one day and said they were going to run some errands. He took a gun with him and told them, "You're going to die today." When Tina asked why, he said that he hated them both. When they returned from running the errands, he put the gun on the top of the fridge and Tina saw her opportunity. She grabbed the gun from the top of the fridge and hid it near her. Miłosz confronted her and she grabbed the weapon. He walked towards her grinning and said that she had no choice but to either kill him or he was going to kill them both. She took the gun and fired, and then she rang police and told them she'd killed her husband. When she was arrested, she had broken ribs, a torn spleen, a broken arm and a fractured wrist, to name just a few of the injuries. She told officers that she would plead guilty if it meant that she could get back out to her son quicker. She spent 20 months in prison for voluntary manslaughter. When she was released from prison, there was a cheering crowd outside, including her son.
In 1976 and 1977, Mark Stebbins, Jill Robinson, Christine Mihalik, and Timothy King were abducted, held for days, and murdered. Their killer, known as the Oakland County Child Killer, has never been caught. Now sources are telling 7 Action News that a new suspect has emerged, and it's someone who is still alive.
I just didn't believe it was her until I went to the morgue to see her. My dad couldn't even identify her. All I know is I want to get a hold of the guy that did it, or whoever did it, because I love my sister.
Footprints here in the snow, on the steps, and fingerprints here on the door frame are among the physical evidence uncovered by the State Police Crime Lab. Right now they're looking for a man believed to be anywhere from 19 to 25 years of age, 5'10" to 6 feet tall, very slender with a prominent nose, and dark, long, wavy hair.
It all began on February 2nd, 1976. Everyone thought it was an isolated case, but the murder of Mark Stebbins of Ferndale remains unsolved. His body turned up 2 weeks after he disappeared in a parking lot in Southfield. The 12-year-old had left his mother and brother at a social function, never to be seen alive again.
Not a day goes by, where you don't wonder and, worry about it, the whys and the wherefores, how long he had been dead before his body was found, who it was.
Based on the investigation to this point, Sergeant, what are your chances of catching the individual or individuals before an incident like this occurs again?
I wouldn't be able to put it in percentage-wise. There'd be no way for me knowing this, and I don't think anybody could put it in a percentage.
Tonight, our look into the cold case of the Oakland County child killer takes us on a road trip to North Fox Island in northern Michigan. Police were investigating a child pornography ring on the island back in 1977. Now, just months after 3 Oakland County children were killed and just weeks before another, Timothy King, was abducted.
The pornography operation was run by a man with ties to Metro Detroit, and police were anxious to find out if he was involved in those serial killings.
Yeah, one theory in the Oakland County child killer case is that it was part of a group of wealthy pedophiles who were trafficking in child pornography and groomed underage kids who became victims. A massive investigation led to 2 people, Frank Sheldon of Grosse Pointe, who owned much of North Fox Island, and Jerry Richards, a teacher in Port Huron who recruited young boys to fly to the island on field trips.
I remember getting on the plane, I was so excited. Me and Mike, and there's 2 other kids. I think one was a grade above us, and one was a grade below us, if I remember correctly. And I remember landing. I remember getting our stuff, getting our cabin, and within an hour, we were naked on the beach. That's just how it was. If you live on an island, this is how they do it. And there's cameras, a lot all over the place, really.
It's the case that's haunted Metro Detroit for more than 3 decades. 4 children abducted and killed along the Woodward Corridor in the mid-70s by the infamous Oakland County child killer.
Christopher Brian Bush was a convicted pedophile who lived in Bloomfield Hills. The 7 investigators were the first to reveal Bush's autopsy report after he allegedly killed himself inside his family's Bloomfield Township home.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
I've covered countless true crime cases, but this one has to be one of the worst. This is the case of Sylvia Likens, who was a 16-year-old girl who, along with her younger sister Jenny, was left in the care of Jeroud Benesweski by her parents. Jeroud was a single mother with several children of her own. She agreed to take care of the Lycan sisters in exchange for a small amount of money every week. The Lycan parents were carnival workers and believed their daughters would be safe with Giroud. But that was far from the truth. Things took a horrific turn when Giroud and her children began to subject Sylvia to prolonged physical and emotional abuse. She was physically beaten, starved, and subjected to various forms of torture. Giroud's children and some neighborhood kids also participated in the abuse. Sylvia was kept locked in the basement where she endured unimaginable suffering. Giroud and the children not only beat Sylvia, but they also forced her to write degrading statements all over her own body, including phrases like, "I'm a prostitute and I'm proud of it." Sylvia was also burned with cigarettes, had her head shaved, and was often deprived of food and water. This abuse continued for months. On one occasion, as the family ate supper, Giroud, Paula, and a neighborhood boy named Randy force-fed Sylvia a hot dog overloaded with condiments, including mustard, ketchup, and spices. Sylvia vomited as a result and was later forced to eat her own vomit. On another occasion, Paula, who was Giroud's daughter, beat Sylvia in the face with such force that she broke her own wrist. Later, Paula used the cast on her wrist to further beat Sylvia. Giroud would also occasionally force Jenny, who was her younger sister, to strike her and beat her. And if she did not comply, they would just beat her. Several of Giroud's children's classmates frequently visited the house to both physically and verbally torment Sylvia. And with Giroud's active encouragement, these neighborhood children and her own routinely beat Sylvia, sometimes even using her as a practice dummy in violent judo sessions, also lacerating her body and burning her with lit cigarettes over 100 times. They also severely injured her genitals. To entertain Giroud and her teenage accomplices, Sylvia was forced at one point to strip naked in the family living room and masturbate with a glass Pepsi Cola bottle in their presence. And this was all for the enjoyment of this woman right here. And due to the increase in the frequency and the brutality of the torture and mistreatment of Sylvia, she gradually became incontinent, which is the uncontrolled leakage of urine. She was then denied any access to the bathroom, being forced to wet herself. And as a form of punishment, Giroud threw Sylvia into the basement and tied her up. Here, Sylvia was kept naked, rarely fed, and frequently deprived of water. Occasionally, she was tied to the railing of the basement stairs with her feet barely touching the ground. On October 25th, Sylvia attempted to escape from the basement after overhearing a conversation, after overhearing Giroud say they were just going to leave her to die in the basement. Sylvia attempted to flee to the front door, however, due to her extensive injuries and general weakness, Giroud caught her before she could escape the property. And on the morning of October 26, 1965, Sylvia Likens tragically succumbed to her injuries and died in the basement. Her cause of death was a combination of severe malnutrition, physical trauma, and the overall abuse she endured. Her body was found with numerous injuries, including broken bones and extensive scarring, and the autopsy showed that there was more than 150 wounds across her body. Giroud was found guilty of first-degree murder and she was sentenced to life in prison. But somehow she was released in 1985 on parole, which is just sickening. She deserves to be underneath the prison. This is just absolutely horrifying. The Sylvia Likens case is a heartbreaking and disturbing true crime story that continues to captivate and horrify people to this day. There's a lot more I could talk about in this case, so if you want a part 2, let me know. Rest in peace to Sylvia Likens, and I can't believe this case.
This stunning cheerleader vanished on holiday. It would take another shocking murder before her killer would face any kind of justice. In May 2005, Natalie Holloway was in the mood to celebrate. The 18-year-old had just graduated from high school and was heading to Aruba with her classmates for the holiday of a lifetime. 124 other seniors joined Natalie in Aruba. On the 30th of the month, they were in a nightclub. It's believed that they left around 1:30 in the morning, and Natalie tried to get a lift back to the Holiday Inn. Concerningly, she never showed up at the airport the next day to get her return flight home. Her packed luggage and her passport were both found in her room at the Holiday Inn. Now, this obviously rang alarm bells. What on earth had happened to Natalie after she left that nightclub? Her mum and stepdad were panicked and flew to Aruba. There was one prime suspect, a male that Natalie had been seen with getting into a car for a lift back to the Holiday Inn. This was 17-year-old Jordan van der Sloot. A friend of Natalie's confirmed that they had actually been speaking to Jordan that evening. They'd seen him several times. Now, what they didn't know and what would be revealed later is he had somewhat of a reputation in the local area. He was known to be predatory to tourists. Now, when police questioned him, he insisted that he and 2 other males had dropped Natalie off at her hotel at around 2 a.m. Now, Jordan claimed to police that he'd actually dropped Natalie off and seen her talking with 2 security guards. Police then arrested